she laughed. "I won't skip my Miami trip just because you're in the hospital." I said, "You're right." But when she tried calling the ward later, the nurse's words made her regret every laugh. The whole thing started during what should have been a routine Tuesday morning flight simulation at the training center. I'm Mason, 29, and I've been flying commercial aircraft for 6 years now, but that morning my chest felt like someone had wrapped steel cables around my heart and started tightening them with a wrench. The pain started subtle during pre-flight checks, then escalated until I was gripping the simulator controls and breaking out in a cold sweat. The instructor took one look at my face and called an ambulance before I could even argue about finishing the session. 2 hours later, I was lying in a hospital bed while a cardiologist explained that my left anterior descending artery was 85% blocked and I needed emergency cardiac catheterization. "We're scheduling you for Thursday morning," Dr. Rodriguez said, his tone making it clear this wasn't optional. "This isn't something we wait on. The widowmaker artery doesn't give second chances." That's when I realized Crystal's girls' trip to Miami was scheduled for Wednesday through Sunday, something she'd been planning and posting about for 3 months. I called her from the cardiac unit, my voice probably shakier than I wanted it to be. "Crystal, I need to tell you something. I'm in the hospital and they found a major blockage in my heart. I need surgery Thursday morning." She laughed. Actually laughed. Not a nervous laugh or a disbelieving laugh, but the kind of dismissive laugh you'd give someone who just told you they saw Bigfoot at the grocery store. "Mason, seriously? You're really going to try this dramatic health theater right before my Miami trip?" I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the 4 fluids. "Crystal, this isn't theater. They showed me the scan. There's a 85% blockage in my main artery. They called it the widowmaker." "Oh please," she said, and I could hear her typing in the background, probably scrolling Instagram. Jessica's brother tried this exact same thing last year when she had her bachelorette party planned. Suddenly he needed emergency appendix surgery. Men always seem to have medical emergencies when women have plans that don't include them. The typing stopped. "Look, I've already paid for this trip. The hotel is non-refundable. Brittany and Ashley are counting on me. I'm not going to cancel a vacation I've been planning for months because you're having some chest pains that are probably just anxiety from work stress." I stared at the cardiac monitor beeping next to my bed, watching my heart rhythm trace across the screen. "Crystal, they're inserting a catheter into my heart. This isn't anxiety." "Whatever, Mason. Figure it out. I'm sure your mom can come sit with you or something. Derek lives in Philadelphia, right? Call him. I'll be back Sunday night and we can talk about it then." The line went dead. I looked at my phone for a long moment, then at the 4 in my arm, then at the stack of consent forms on my bedside table that I still needed to sign. 30 minutes later, Crystal's Instagram story popped up, a photo of her suitcase with designer clothes spilling out, captioned, "Miami state of mind with my girls. Some people try to bring the drama, but I'm bringing the sunshine. Hashtag no negativity, hashtag girls trip, hashtag living my best life." I screenshotted it, though I wasn't sure why at the time. Then I turned off my phone and asked the nurse if I could get something to help me sleep. I called Derek Wednesday morning before they wheeled me into the procedure room. My college roommate had always been the reliable one, the guy who showed up when things got serious, and hearing his voice crack when I explained the situation told me everything I needed to know about how real this was. "I'm driving down from Philadelphia right now," he said without hesitation. "I'll be there in 3 hours. Don't you dare go into that procedure without someone who actually gives a damn about you being there." The cardiac catheterization went smoothly, but Dr. Rodriguez decided to keep me sedated longer than usual for observation since my blood pressure had been fluctuating. I was unconscious for most of Thursday, drifting in and out while Derek sat in the chair next to my bed, fielding calls and updating my parents. Meanwhile, Crystal's Instagram stories painted a picture of paradise: poolside cocktails at 11 a.m., designer bikinis, and captions about living authentically with my soul sisters. She posted a video of herself and her friends at some exclusive rooftop bar, toasting to friendship and freedom from toxic energy. The irony wasn't lost on Derek, who was screenshotting everything while I slept off the anesthesia. "Dude, you're not going to believe this. he said Friday morning when I was fully awake, scrolling through his phone. She's been calling every hospital in a 3-state radius because apparently Patricia told her you were experiencing complications. Patricia was the head nurse in cardiac intensive care, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. When Crystal called the unit Thursday evening demanding updates, Patricia had calmly explained that Mason was experiencing post-procedural complications and remained unconscious, which was technically accurate since I was sedated for recovery monitoring. What Patricia didn't mention was that the complications were routine blood pressure fluctuations and that I was sleeping peacefully. Crystal's panic escalated immediately. Since Derek was listed as my emergency contact and she wasn't legally family, she had no right to detailed medical information. This sent her into a frenzy that Derek captured in real time through her increasingly desperate voicemails. "Mason, baby, I know you're mad at me, but please call me back. The nurses won't tell me anything and I'm scared. I love you so much. Please just let me know you're okay." 20 minutes later, her tone had shifted. "This is insane. I'm your fiancé and they're treating me like some random stranger. Derek better call me back in the next hour or I'm calling every medical board in the state. This is discrimination." An hour after that, full paranoia had set in. "I know you're all conspiring against me. This is completely illegal. I'm documenting everything for my lawyer. They can't just hide a patient from his fiancé." Derek played them back for me, grinning like he'd won the lottery. She called 17 different hospitals between Thursday night and Friday morning. 17. She started with our hospital, then expanded to every cardiac center within 100 miles. The nurses here are taking bets on whether she'll hit 20 before the weekend's over. But the most entertaining part was watching her Instagram stories evolve in real time. Thursday's posts were still pure vacation mode. Beach selfies, shots of expensive seafood dinners, videos of her group dancing at some club until 3 a.m. But by Friday morning, her content had shifted dramatically. She posted a tearful video from what looked like her hotel bathroom, claiming she was worried sick about her fiancé who was fighting for his life while she was trapped in Miami. The problem was her previous stories created a timestamp trail that told a very different story. Derek had screenshots of her partying at midnight Thursday, just hours after calling hospitals in hysterics about my supposedly critical condition. By Friday afternoon, Crystal's Instagram had become a masterclass in self-destruction. Her vacation highlights reel told one story while her emergency posts told another, and her followers were starting to notice the inconsistencies. She posted a tearful video from Miami International Airport claiming she was catching the first flight home due to my critical condition. But eagle-eyed followers had already screenshotted her stories from just 3 hours earlier showing her at some beachside club with bottle service. The comments section became a battlefield. "Girl, weren't you just posting about mojitos at noon?" one follower wrote. "This timeline doesn't add up," wrote another, with screenshots attached. Crystal started deleting comments and blocking people, which only made her look more suspicious. Meanwhile, her frantic hospital calling spree had expanded beyond anything Derek or I could have imagined. She'd started with cardiac centers, then moved to general hospitals, then began calling emergency rooms asking if they had any John Does matching my description. By Saturday morning, she'd contacted medical facilities in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, convinced there was some massive conspiracy to hide my condition from her. She called Johns Hopkins at 2 a.m., Derek told me, barely able to contain his laughter. Johns Hopkins. In Baltimore. She asked if they had secretly transferred you there under an assumed name. The nursing staff had started taking bets on which state she'd call next. Patricia showed me a tally sheet they'd taped to the nurses' station: 17 hospitals in our state, 12 in Pennsylvania, 8 in New Jersey, 3 in Delaware, and 1 random call to a clinic in Maryland that specialized in podiatry. "Your fiancé asked if we were hiding heart patients in our foot clinic," Patricia said with professional deadpan delivery. "I told her we typically stick to bunions and ingrown toenails." Crystal's paranoia reached new heights when she started threatening to contact medical boards, the state health department, and even local news stations. She left a voicemail for Derek claiming she was going to expose the systematic cover-up of my medical emergency and that heads were going to roll. "I'm not stupid," she sobbed into Derek's voicemail Saturday night. "I know you're all working together to punish me for going to Miami. This is illegal medical discrimination and I'm going to make sure everyone pays for this." Derek played the message for the nursing staff during their Saturday night shift, and they laughed so hard that Patricia had to shush them to avoid disturbing actual patients. Crystal's friend group started turning on her in the comment sections of her posts. Ashley, one of her Miami travel companions, commented on Crystal's airport video, "Girl, you were literally taking shots with us 2 hours ago. What's really going on?" Brittany added fuel to the fire, "Crystal, I'm confused. You said Mason was manipulating you on Tuesday, now you're saying he's dying? Which is it?" Crystal's responses became increasingly erratic. She claimed her friends were jealous and trying to sabotage her during a family crisis. She accused Ashley of being a fake friend and blocked Brittany entirely. By Sunday morning, her social media presence had devolved into paranoid rants about medical conspiracies and toxic people trying to destroy her relationship. The nurses had started a betting pool not just on how many more hospitals she'd call, but on what conspiracy theory she'd come up with next. Crystal burst through the cardiac unit doors Sunday afternoon like she was storming a fortress, her Miami tan contrasting sharply with the fluorescent hospital lighting. She'd cut her trip short by 2 days, apparently convinced that every hour away was another hour of conspiracy against her. Derek and I watched from my room as she marched up to the nurse's station demanding to see me immediately, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Where is Mason Williams? I'm his fiancé and I've been calling for 3 days trying to get information about his condition. This is completely unacceptable." Patricia calmly directed her to my room, and I'll never forget the look on Crystal's face when she saw me sitting up in bed, alert and obviously fine, eating Jell-O and watching the news with Derek. The color drained from her face as the reality hit her. I was never in critical condition, never fighting for my life, never in any danger that warranted her dramatic social media meltdown. "Mason?" she said, her voice small and confused. "You're okay?" "I'm recovering normally, just like the doctors said I would." I kept my tone even, watching her process the disconnect between her imagined crisis and the actual situation. "But the nurse said you had complications. That you were unconscious." "I was sedated for observation. Standard procedure." Derek couldn't resist chiming in. He's been awake and complaining about hospital food since Friday morning. "The explosion came exactly as I expected. So you let me think you were dying? You let me panic for 3 days? I cut my vacation short, I called dozens of hospitals, I made a complete fool of myself online because I thought you were in critical condition." "Crystal," I said quietly, "I called you Tuesday to tell you about my surgery. You laughed and hung up on me. I never called you again." The truth hit her like cold water. She stood there in her designer vacation outfit, her Miami highlights still fresh, realizing that her entire dramatic narrative had been self-created. During those 3 days in the hospital, something else had happened that I hadn't mentioned to Crystal yet. My neighbor Lily, who ran a small catering business from her apartment, had been bringing me homemade meals. She'd heard from Derek that I was in the hospital and had been quietly making sure I had real food instead of hospital cafeteria mystery meat. "I know recovery is hard when you're eating plastic food," she'd said, bringing me homemade soup and fresh bread. "My mom always said good food heals faster than medicine." The contrast was impossible to ignore. While my fiancé was posting poolside selfies and calling me manipulative, my neighbor was showing the kind of genuine care that Crystal had never demonstrated in 3 years together. Crystal's public meltdown continued online even after she discovered I was fine. She posted lengthy explanations about being gaslit by medical professionals and manipulated by a fake emergency, but her own social media history provided evidence against every claim she made. Screenshots of her partying while claiming to be worried sick made her look delusional at best, pathologically dishonest at worst. Her employer, a high-end real estate firm, started receiving calls from clients who recognized her from the viral hospital drama. Colleagues began distancing themselves from her increasingly erratic behavior, and her supervisor called her in for a meeting about social media conduct that reflects poorly on the company. I ended our engagement that Sunday afternoon, right there in the hospital room with Derek as a witness. Crystal, this is over. We're done. You can't be serious. I was worried about you. I came home early. You came home early because you realized your story wasn't adding up and your friends were calling you out online. I pulled the engagement ring off my finger and handed it to her. You showed me exactly where I rank in your priorities, and I believe you. She oscillated between rage and desperate attempts at reconciliation for the next 2 hours, but I'd already started the process of removing her from all my legal documents and preparing to evict her from my condo. Within 2 weeks of our breakup, Crystal's entire life began unraveling in spectacular fashion. A client complaint triggered an investigation into her social media conduct, and the real estate licensing board didn't appreciate her public meltdown about medical conspiracies and fake emergencies. Her license was suspended pending review, effectively ending her career in luxury real estate. But losing her job only escalated her obsession with blaming everyone else for her problems. She started stalking my building, sitting in her car at all hours watching for signs of activity. I'd catch glimpses of her through my window, sometimes parked there at 2 a.m., sometimes at 6 a.m. when I left for physical therapy. The notes started appearing on my car windshield within days. Handwritten screeds about how Lily was a predatory nurse who targeted vulnerable patients, even though Lily wasn't a nurse and had never worked in healthcare. She's manipulating you while you're weak, one note read. Real women don't prey on men in hospitals. She saw an opportunity and took it. Crystal had somehow convinced herself that Lily was part of some elaborate scheme to steal me while I was vulnerable, rather than simply accepting that a kind person had shown basic human decency during my recovery. Her harassment campaign against Lily escalated quickly from delusional notes to direct threats through social media. She created fake accounts to leave one-star reviews on Lily's catering business, claiming she used dirty kitchen practices and targets lonely men with sob story meals. The reviews became increasingly unhinged. This so-called caterer preys on vulnerable people in medical situations. She uses food to manipulate emotionally damaged men. Stay away. When fake reviews weren't enough, Crystal moved to direct threats. She sent messages through Instagram, Facebook, and even LinkedIn, describing in disturbing detail what home-wrecking meal delivery girls deserved to have happened to them. The messages included specific threats about accidents that could happen to someone who steals other women's men, and detailed descriptions of how food businesses could be sabotaged. Crystal's former friend network completely abandoned her after she posted a 45-minute live video while clearly intoxicated. She sat in her car outside my building, showing screenshots of private conversations and accidentally revealing her own manipulative text messages that completely contradicted her victim narrative. The video showed messages where she'd called me a boring pilot who thinks he's hot shit, and told her friends she was only with him for the financial security until someone better comes along. She'd meant to show how her friends had betrayed her, but instead she exposed herself as a gold digger who'd been playing a long con. Ashley and Brittany shared screenshots of Crystal's real opinions about me, showing a 3-year pattern of her complaining about my boring job, my cheap dates, and how she was settling until she found someone with real money. The evidence painted a picture of someone who'd been using me as a placeholder while shopping for upgrades. She moved from couch to couch as friends kicked her out one by one. Ashley lasted 3 days before Crystal's paranoid rants about medical conspiracies became too much. Brittany wouldn't even let her stay overnight after Crystal accused her of being part of the plot. Her parents finally cut contact after she showed up at their house demanding they choose between supporting her or believing the lies everyone is spreading. The threats against Lily became so specific and disturbing that I started documenting everything. Photos of Crystal sitting in her car outside my building at all hours, screenshots of her threatening messages, copies of the fake reviews she'd posted. Derek helped me compile a comprehensive file that would make any restraining order application ironclad. The restraining order was approved within 48 hours, which should tell you something about how overwhelming the evidence was. The judge took one look at the stack of threatening messages, photos of Crystal stalking my building, and her unhinged social media posts and granted a full protective order without hesitation. Crystal was legally required to stay at least 500 feet away from me, Lily, my building, and my workplace. For exactly 1 week, she complied, and I started to think maybe she'd finally accepted reality and moved on. Then Derek got a frantic call from my building's security guard at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Your friend's crazy ex is here again, and she's completely out of her mind." Crystal had appeared at my condo building heavily intoxicated, clutching a wine bottle and screaming accusations about medical fraud and relationship sabotage loud enough to wake half the complex. She was pounding on the glass lobby doors with the bottle, leaving smudges and demanding that the conspiracy against her be exposed to the world. "I know you're all working together," she shrieked at the security guard. "Mason and that nurse bitch planned this whole thing. The fake heart attack, the fake emergency, all of it." When the guard reminded her about the restraining order, she claimed it was illegally obtained through medical fraud and that she had evidence that would expose everyone involved. Derek was staying with me to help during my recovery, and he decided this was the perfect opportunity to have what he called some fun with the situation. When Crystal started pounding on my actual door 20 minutes later, having somehow bypassed building security, Derek grabbed a full container of flour from my kitchen. "Trust me on this," he said with a grin that should have been my first warning. He opened the door just enough to dump the entire 5-pound bag of flour over Crystal's head, covering her completely in white powder from head to toe. The shrieking that followed could probably be heard 3 blocks away. Crystal looked like she'd been dipped in concrete mix, flour coating her hair, her face, her clothes, turning her into some kind of deranged ghost. She started screaming about assault and battery while simultaneously ranting about medical conspiracies, creating a spectacle that woke the entire building. "This is assault. This is illegal. You're all working together to destroy me," she screamed, flour flying everywhere as she gestured wildly. "The doctors, the nurses, the neighbors, all of you are part of this conspiracy." Neighbors started coming out to see what the commotion was about, and several of them started recording with their phones. Derek stood in the doorway looking absolutely delighted with himself while Crystal continued her flour-covered breakdown in the hallway. "Ma'am, you're violating a restraining order while publicly intoxicated," Derek said calmly. "Plus, you look like you've been attacked by the Pillsbury Doughboy." The police arrived within 10 minutes to find Crystal still covered in flour, still screaming about conspiracies, and clearly violating the restraining order while intoxicated. She tried to explain to the officers that she was the victim of an elaborate medical fraud scheme, but her flour-covered appearance and incoherent rambling about fake heart attacks and predatory nurses made her sound completely unhinged. The arrest was swift and efficient. Crystal spent the night in jail, still covered in flour, while facing charges for violating the restraining order, public intoxication, and making threats. Her booking photo, featuring her ghost-white appearance and wild-eyed expression, became legendary in our neighborhood social media groups. Crystal's arrest made her unemployable overnight. The flour incident video went viral in our neighborhood Facebook groups, and her backup retail job at an upscale boutique terminated her immediately after customers started recognizing her as the crazy flour lady from the arrest video. Her landlord evicted her within the month, citing the criminal charges and multiple noise complaints from neighbors who'd grown tired of her late-night phone calls to various conspiracy theorists and legal aid societies. With no job, no home, and no friends willing to help, Crystal was forced to move across the country to live with reluctant relatives in Arizona who barely tolerated her continued claims of being the victim of an elaborate medical conspiracy. Her aunt lasted exactly 3 weeks before putting strict limits on Crystal's internet access and phone usage after she tried to get the local news interested in her medical fraud story. Meanwhile, my life transformed in ways I never expected. Lily and I had been spending more time together during my recovery, and what started as neighborly kindness evolved into something genuine and meaningful. She brought me meals not because she pitied me, but because she enjoyed our conversations about her catering business and my aviation stories. Unlike Crystal, who'd always seemed bored when I talked about flying, Lily was genuinely fascinated by the technical aspects and loved hearing about different destinations I'd flown to. You know what I love about you? Lily said one evening as we shared dinner she'd prepared. You never make me feel like I should be grateful you're giving me attention. Crystal made you feel like you should thank her for existing in your life. She was absolutely right. For 3 years, Crystal had treated my affection like a favor she was doing me, while Lily appreciated my company and contributed equally to our relationship. We started officially dating 6 months after my surgery, and the difference was remarkable. Lily insisted on splitting dinner checks, planned thoughtful dates within both our budgets, and celebrated my career achievements instead of treating them as boring inconveniences. Derek became a local legend for the flower incident, which neighbors still referenced months later when discussing building security and crazy ex-girlfriend protocols. The story evolved in the telling, with Derek's timing becoming more heroic and Crystal's flower-covered breakdown becoming more spectacular with each retelling. Remember when Derek flower-bombed that psycho ex? Became a standard conversation starter at building social events. Patricia and the cardiac unit nurses still asked about Crystal whenever I went for follow-up appointments, genuinely curious about whether she'd found new hospitals to harass or conspiracy theories to pursue. That girl called us 17 times in 3 days, Patricia would remind new staff members. 17 times for a routine cardiac procedure. Some people create their own drama. Crystal's online presence devolves into increasingly desperate posts about medical gaslighting and relationship sabotage conspiracies that attracted only mockery and concern from the few people still following her accounts. Her posts about systematic oppression of truth-telling women and coordinated harassment by medical professionals read like manifestos from someone completely detached from reality. Her comment sections filled with strangers suggesting therapy and former friends expressing genuine worry about her mental state. I reflected often on how my near-death experience had revealed Crystal's true character and led me to someone who actually cared about my health and happiness. The heart attack that could have killed me instead saved me from a lifetime with someone who saw me as a financial safety net rather than a partner. Lily and I moved in together a year later, and she insisted on contributing equally to household expenses despite my protests that I could cover more. Partners support each other, she said firmly. They don't keep score, but they also don't take advantage. Derek jokes that sometimes the best medicine is a good friend and a bag of flour, and honestly, he's not wrong. The flower incident became our relationship's origin story, the moment we all realized Crystal's true nature and could finally laugh about the chaos she'd created.